Good morning and welcome to Together in God, a media ministry of Grace and St. John's Lutheran Churches. We are affiliated with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. We are happy to share with you God's message of love and hope. Today's service is being brought to you from St. John's Lutheran Church. The church is located at 1804 Highland Avenue in Eau Claire. Please join us now in worship.
The Bible reading this morning is from Ruth 1, verses 1 through 17. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went to the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the Moabite husband, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. Those 2 Moabite wives, the name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. When they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I thought if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." Word of God, word of life.
I invite children to come forward now. Okay. Perfect. We got 6. We're a little heavy on guys here, so you know what? In the old days, sometimes girls played boys' roles and boys played girls' roles. So I'm going to have to ask you to suck it up. Okay, come on up here, players. Here's the play that we're at. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Can you come here and be Naomi? Okay, right here. And, just for fun, here, you are Elimelech. You are a married couple, okay? And your two sons are these guys right here, okay? You guys are the sons, okay? And you two, come on over here. You're going to have to play one of those guys' wives, okay? I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. Okay, you guys step over here. Okay, here's the story. There was, in the land of Israel, in Bethlehem, a family, a very nice family here. And the problem was a famine came across the land. And because of this famine, these people were all very hungry. Turn around and look hungry, okay? Okay, look really sad and rub your tummies. Okay, all right. But you heard that over in Moab there was food. Yes, so you're all gonna go over to Moab, okay? Travel over to Moab. You guys back up just a little bit, okay? Okay, so you're in Moab now and you got food, which means you're happy. So high five each other. High five each other. Okay, there we go. Lots of high fives. There we go. Okay, so everything's going great. Great, except Elimelech, you die. Oh, you're Elimelech? Oh, excuse me. You die, okay? Die. Do a nice dying scene for us. Okay. Nice work. Beautiful. So, now help me keep track of who's who here, okay? Because now I'm confused. Okay, so Naomi, you are Naomi. Now you're sad because your husband died, but you still have 2 sons who can still provide food for you until, well, first of all, they marry 2 people. You come here. Okay, you're married to him. You're married to him, okay? Okay, now, you're doing just fine until both of the sons die. Son, die. Die, okay. So, now, Naomi has a problem here. She knows nobody left in this country, and so she remembers she was back in Israel, and so she says to her 2 daughters-in-law, I'm going back. And you 2 guys, you say, no, shake your heads. Say, no, we're going to go with you. Now, you shake your head. Shake your head. There. No. You guys don't go with her because you belong here. And you say, okay, sorry. And you turn around and walk away. Okay? Yeah. Now, you, not you. You are the hero of the story here. You come here. Both of you. Okay. And you're telling her, no, I'm going to go with you no matter where you go, no matter what happens, because you really need me. And you kind of shrug. All right. And the 2 of you go back to Israel. Curtain falls, end of the story. Okay? Good work. All right. Nice work, guys. What we did was we just acted out the story of Ruth, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in my sermon, okay? We'll see you next week. Please stand for the gospel acclamation. Gospel according to Mark, the 3rd chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. And he replied, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking at those who sat around him, Jesus said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Christ. If you will bear with me for one more episode of Scientific Literature Month at St. John's, we explore today one of the most acclaimed movies of this year, The Martian. The plot revolves around Mark Watney, who is part of an American space crew exploring Mars. During a catastrophic windstorm, Watney is blasted by debris, goes missing, and is believed dead. Desperate to escape the planet before a storm disables their craft, the crew blast off, leaving his body behind. Watney survives, however, and when he regains consciousness, discovered he has been stranded on Mars. He has no way to communicate with anyone. It will be years before another space probe comes into the area. The planet has neither soil nor water for him to grow the food he needs to survive. It appears Watney is doomed. Through no fault of his own, an incredibly unlucky series of events has conspired to condemn him to a short, lonely, miserable life. Our Bible story today begins with that similar tragedy. Naomi knows exactly how Watney feels. During a severe famine in her hometown of Bethlehem, she and her family were forced to move to the country of Moab. It was a hostile landscape for a Jewish family, but they adapted and began to make a good life for themselves until suddenly the wheels come off. Naomi's husband dies. In this culture, not only was the death of a husband difficult on a personal level, it meant loss of security for the widow who had no legal status or means of making a living. Naomi at least has her 2 sons to help her survive, but that too is short-lived. For the sons who've married Moabite women soon die, leaving Naomi absolutely destitute. She appears doomed. Her only option is to travel back to her hometown, where she still has some distant relatives and possibly some family friends who might steer a few crumbs her way. Through no fault of her own, an incredibly unlucky series of events has conspired to condemn her to a short, lonely, miserable life. Without giving too much of the story away, astronaut Watney is determined to fight the incredible odds against him by doing what NASA prescribes for such situations: work the problem. Set aside for the moment your terror of the situation. Identify specific problems that put you at risk, and one by one, try to solve those problems. It sounds simple, of course, but it's not. Very few people put in his situation would have had a chance of surviving for even a short amount of time. Watney has an amazing ability to keep calm and an even more extraordinary ability to imagine creative solutions to problems that face him. Naomi's is the more typical response to catastrophe. Upon the death of her 2 sons, she sees that it's all over for her. There's nothing she or anyone can do to save her. As she's leaving Moab, she breaks down in tears repeatedly. And those are not tears of grief for the lost family, but for herself and her desperate situation. "No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you," she says to the daughters-in-law. An incredibly insensitive comment to make to 2 young women who are each mourning the loss of their own husbands. Naomi is in such despair that she cries out that God Almighty is part of this vast conspiracy to destroy her life. "The hand of the Lord has turned against me," she wails. One could not have blamed astronaut Watney if he had indulged in this kind of pity party. He certainly had reason to. Had he done that, however, he would have just shriveled up and died instead of trying to find solutions. the story would have taken a very different turn. It would not have been much of a story at all. One could not have blamed Naomi for giving up the way she did. Most people in her situation, overwhelmed by misfortune and unable to see any options, would have probably given up too. Her story would not have been worth telling were it not for the difficult choice faced by her two daughters-in-law. At first, both Orpah and Ruth begin to accompany their distraught and destitute mother-in-law back on her sad journey to Bethlehem. Wallowing in her misery, Naomi tells them to go back to their families. They have no legal or moral obligation to go with her. In fact, if they were to join her in Bethlehem, they would be entering a strange and unwelcoming society. They would be leaving the security and love of their own families in Moab. Naomi has absolutely nothing to offer them. If they come with her, they will be doomed to the same short, miserable, lonely existence that Naomi sees for herself. Go back, she tells them. Still, Orpah and Ruth have compassion on her. They see that in her present state of mind, there's not a chance in the world she could survive the hardships ahead of her. They don't want her to face that alone. Look, this is your problem. This is not your problem, Naomi says. She's being noble, a little bit of a martyr complex. Orpah finally recognizes that Naomi is right. Her mother-in-law's difficulties are her own problem. It would be nice if she could do something for Naomi, and she was willing to give it a try, but on further reflection, she comes to realize that it's pointless for her to sacrifice her own life and family and friends just to try to help her mother-in-law eke out a few more miserable years. There really isn't much she can do for her. So she turns back and moves on with her life, with some tears and some pangs of regret. We cannot blame her at all for her actions because it isn't her problem. By any logical, rational measure, she is making the right choice. Ruth faces exactly the same choice as Orpah. Only she makes a stunningly irrational decision. She will give up the life that she knows. She will give up her chances for a decent future to go to a strange place where Moabites like her are not wanted, to spend a life in misery and poverty with an in-law. She gives her answer to Naomi in these beautiful, passionate words that we so often hear at weddings. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. You would think Naomi would be touched by such an eloquent display of compassion and loyalty, but we see no sign that Ruth's words affect her at all. There's no indication she cares in any way that Ruth is willing to sacrifice so much for her. She says nothing. She just shrugs as if to say, suit yourself, you crazy girl. And after the two of them survive that long, arduous trip back to Bethlehem, Naomi finds a bit more sympathy and compassion than she had expected. But in her hopeless state, even that is of little consolation to her. She continues to lament the loss of her stable, comfortable life that she led. Call me no longer Naomi, she says to the folks back home. Call me Mara, which is the Hebrew word for bitter. For the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi, which means pleasant, when the Lord has dealt harshly with me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? At this point, there's little doubt what would have happened to Naomi had Ruth not made that bizarre decision to go with her. Naomi doesn't have a plan. People without hope are incapable of making plans. Most likely she would have lived out what days she had left in miserable poverty. Fortunately, Ruth was there, and she begins to work the problem. Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain behind someone in whose sight I may find favor, she says. May not be much, but at least we'll have something to eat for a few days, and we'll go from there. Go, my daughter, says Naomi. Notice she doesn't say, good idea, I'll go with you. She just sits there and says, sure, whatever. Do what you want. We have not seen any sign yet that she has any hope. Hope that would give her the strength and will to do something for herself. Only after Ruth returns home with an encouraging report about what happened in the field between her and the wealthy field owner Boaz does Naomi spring back to life. Now, because of Ruth, she sees possibility. Now she sees hope. Now she's able to start working the problem. And because she can do this, a miserable life and a bleak future become filled with possibility that culminates in the birth of Ruth's grandson, the great King David. Naomi could never have gotten there on her own. She needed someone to help her through the darkness back to light. I suppose there are two lessons to be learned from this Old Testament story of Ruth, especially in comparison with the Martian. The first is to keep courage, never give up. Had Mark Watney given up as Naomi did, he would have shriveled up and died alone, without a fight, in the corner of a universe. Faith is often thought of as a belief in certain set of doctrines or unprovable facts. The Martian, however, reminds us that faith means something far greater than that. Faith is a refusal to give up on life, no matter what tragedy befalls. Faith is heeding the poet Dylan Thomas's words, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And Ruth adds another layer to that. Faith is trusting in God no matter what tragedy befalls. Faith is believing that though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I need fear no evil. That goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That kind of faith turns a tragic story into a fascinating adventure that brings a possibility of life and hope, peace and joy. The second lesson in these stories is that we're all in this together. Every one of us has times when circumstances conspire against us. When tragedy drives us to our knees, even if we've been personally lucky enough to escape some of the catastrophes that others face, if we're honest, we admit there are times when we struggle to keep the faith. And when that happens, whose problem is it? Every one of us has been in Orpah's shoes. When confronted with horrific tragedy that takes place every day in our world, if it does not directly involve us, we conclude it is not our problem. And I don't mean that as a criticism or an accusation, because it's true. It's not our problem. Orpah is correct when she concludes that it makes no sense for her to try to fix this for Naomi. She's not a bad person for making that choice. As Judy wisely said in her Community and World Talk the other week, we cannot fix all of the problems of the world by ourselves. It would be foolish for us to try. No one has the right to expect us to sacrifice in order to help them solve their problems, the problems that they seem incapable of dealing with. On the other hand, neither do we have a right to criticize or look down on people who have lost hope. Our society does a lot of scoffing at people to whom the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune have inflicted such deadly wounds that they cannot keep going. We talk a lot about such people pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, whatever those are. But look at Naomi. I would argue that in her reaction to terrible calamity, Naomi was not the exception but the rule. Loss of hope is paralyzing. Without hope, how do you summon the energy and the will to work the problems of life? The Bible tells us not to look on such people with scorn, but rather, as Ruth did, with compassion. To recognize that there but for fortune go I. To recognize that when the light goes dark in someone's life, there's really only one thing that can turn that light back on, and that is love. illogical, irrational love that takes someone else's problem and makes it their own. This holds as true for you and me as for anyone out there in the streets. Even astronaut Watney, one of the most resourceful and self-reliant individuals in the entire universe, reached the end of the line as to what he could do for himself. He reached a point at which his only hope required depending on somebody else. Someone who, motivated by God knows what, might make an irrational choice to sacrifice something to show extraordinary compassion. There was no logical, rational reason for Ruth to take on Naomi's problem as her own. The only explanation I can think of is that God moved her to do so, to bring light into a life that had abandoned all hope. I know of no logical or rational reason why medical workers in Africa waded into the heart of the Ebola epidemic to care for people they did not even know. Indeed, there are those who publicly scorn them for that decision, which cost some of these workers their lives. The only explanation I can imagine is that the Spirit of God moved them to do so, to bring light into lives that had lost all hope. I know of no logical or rational reason why people in this congregation take on other people's problems. It has to be the Spirit of God that moves us to do so. We cannot solve everyone's problems, but I thank God that the Spirit sometimes motivates people to open their hearts to do irrational, illogical things for those who have lost hope. I pray for each of us the life-giving experience of taking on someone else's problem and providing the hope that gives them the will to be able to start working the problem themselves. Amen. I invite you to stand now and join in singing the sermon hymn.
Thank you for being a part of Together in God, brought to you today by St. John's Lutheran Church. Your prayers and financial support are always deeply appreciated, and the hand of fellowship and ministry is extended to you. St. John's holds services on Sunday mornings at 8:15 and 10:45 a.m., and on Monday evening at 7 p.m. Please tune in again next Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Until we meet again, may God bless you.